Welcome. Tonight, we're going to drift away from the noise of the modern world and step into a time when the night was absolute and the cold was a living presence. I want you to imagine the air is so sharp it feels like shattered glass against your skin. We are easing into the deep, frozen heart of a medieval winter, a time when the sun feels like a distant memory and the darkness arrives in the middle of the afternoon. You are standing at the edge of a small, snow-buried village. The sky above is a bruised purple, fading rapidly into a charcoal black. There are no streetlights here, no hum of electricity, no distant roar of traffic. There is only the wind, hissing through the bare branches of ancient oaks and the crunch of dry, frozen snow beneath your boots. To survive a night like this in the Middle Ages required more than just a blanket. It required a strategy, a community, and a kind of quiet endurance that we have largely forgotten. As you walk down the narrow, rutted path between the houses, you can feel the temperature dropping by the second. It seeks out every gap in your clothing, every seam, every loose thread. The houses here are low and huddled against the earth, looking more like organic mounds of timber and thatch than buildings. They are built of wattle and daub, woven sticks plastered with mud, straw, and animal dung. It sounds primitive, and it is, but as you run your hand along the rough, frozen surface of a wall, you realize this is the only shield these people have against a winter that wants to claim them. This creates the perfect atmosphere for us to explore the hidden history of medieval sleeping habits and winter survival. It is a story of shared warmth, of peculiar superstitions, and of the incredible resilience of the human spirit in the face of the long dark. You step up to a low wooden door. It is thick, heavy oak, darkened by years of smoke and weather. There is no handle, just a latch string or a heavy iron ring. You push it open and quickly slip inside, immediately leaning your weight back against it to shut out the wind. The difference in temperature is subtle but life-saving. It isn't warm in here, not by our standards, but the air is still. It smells of wood smoke, unwashed wool, dried herbs, and the distinct musk-heavy scent of livestock. That is because in this world, humans and animals are roommates by necessity. Your eyes take a moment to adjust to the gloom. The only light comes from a central hearth where a fire has been carefully banked down for the night. In the medieval world, firewood was a currency as valuable as coin. You couldn't simply burn logs all night long. You had to ration them. The family who lives here has let the flames die down to a bed of pulsing orange embers covered with a layer of gray ash to keep the heat alive until morning. It is a dim, red eye watching over the room. You move closer to the center of the cottage. The floor beneath your feet is hard-packed earth, swept smooth by generations of brooms made from birch twigs. But if you stand very still, you will notice something strange. The floor vibrates. A low, rhythmic thumping sound comes from beneath the floorboards or from behind a thin wooden partition. This is the sound of survival. The family's cow, perhaps a few goats, and maybe a pig are sleeping right there, just inches away. In some regions, the house was built directly over the barn. In others, the animals lived in the room next door. Their large bodies act as living radiators, generating a steady, humid warmth that rises up and keeps the air in the cottage just a few degrees above freezing. It is a symbiotic relationship. The humans provide the shelter, and the animals provide the heat. As you look around the single open room, you begin to understand that privacy is a luxury that winter does not allow. In the medieval world, sleeping was a communal act. To sleep alone was to freeze. You see a large, raised platform in the corner, piled high with straw. This is the bed. It is not a soft, springy mattress, but a pallet of dried stalks, rustling and shifting with every movement. Over the straw, they have laid a rough linen sheet, and over that, a chaotic mountain of wool blankets, old cloaks, and even rugs. The family is preparing for bed, and their routine is a fascinating dance of practicality and superstition. They do not change into pajamas. To remove your clothes in this temperature would be madness. Instead, they loosen their belts and perhaps take off their outer boots, but the tunics, the hose, and the woolen undershirts stay on. They sleep fully dressed, wrapped in the same wool that protected them in the fields during the day. You can imagine the texture of that wool, scratchy, dense, and smelling of lanolin and wood smoke. It is heavy, but that weight feels reassuring when the wind is howling outside like a hungry wolf. You watch as the mother of the household does something curious. She takes a smooth, round stone from the edge of the hearth. It has been sitting near the fire all evening, absorbing the heat. She wraps it in a scrap of thick cloth and tucks it into the bottom of the straw mattress, right where the children's feet will go. It is a hot water bottle made of rock, a tiny island of heat that will last for a few hours. Then there is the matter of the bed itself. It is huge, designed to hold everyone. The parents, the children, sometimes an aunt or a grandmother all pile into this single space. It is a nest. They sleep arranged by a hierarchy of warmth. The smallest children are placed in the middle, sandwiched between the bodies of the adults. This isn't just affection, it is thermodynamics. The center of the bed is the warmest place in the house. The father usually takes the outer edge, the spot most exposed to the drafts, his back acting as a windbreak for the rest of the family. As they settle down, the straw crunches and whispers. There is a lot of shifting and murmuring. You can imagine the sensation of cold noses pressing against warm shoulders, of icy toes seeking out the heat of a sibling's calf. It is a pile of humanity, breathing in unison. The air in the room grows heavy with carbon dioxide and body heat, creating a microclimate under the covers that is surprisingly cozy. But sleep in the medieval winter was not a solid 8-hour block like we strive for today. It was segmented. This is one of the most fascinating aspects of historical daily life. They would sleep for about 4 hours, the first sleep, and then wake up in the dead of night. For an hour or so, the house would stir with quiet activity. Imagine waking up in this pitch-black room. The embers in the hearth cast long, dancing shadows on the thatch roof. You might hear the wind rattling the shutters, testing the hinges. During this waking period, people didn't just toss and turn, they used the time. They might tend to the fire, ensuring it didn't go out completely. Farmers might check on a sick animal. Mothers might nurse infants. It was a time for quiet conversation, for prayer, or even for intimacy, hidden under the heavy layers of wool. This watch in the middle of the night was a secret world, a time when the demands of the labor-intensive day were suspended, and all that mattered was the safety of the house. Then, as the cold began to seep back into their bones, they would drift back into the second sleep, which would last until the rooster crowed or the gray light of dawn leaked through the cracks in the walls. Hunger was another bedfellow in these long months. By February, the hunger gap would begin. The stores of grain, salted meat, and dried beans harvested in the autumn would start to dwindle. You can imagine the gnawing feeling of an empty stomach as you try to fall asleep. The body burns more calories just trying to stay warm, yet there is less food to fuel it. This is why the evening meal, often just a thin pottage or broth, was eaten as close to bedtime as possible, to give the body a little warmth to work with. You notice something hanging from the rafters above the bed. It looks like a bundle of dried weeds. This is likely mugwort, lavender, or chamomile. The medieval world was full of invisible threats, demons, miasmas, night airs. These herbs weren't just for a pleasant smell, they were spiritual armor. People believed that the night air carried sickness. By hanging strong-smelling herbs above the sleeper, they hoped to purify the air before it entered their lungs. They also used charms. You might see a small iron knife tucked into the wood of the bed frame, or a cross woven from straw. These were protections against the nightmare, which they believed was not just a bad dream, but an actual entity, a goblin or hag, that sat on your chest and stole your breath. Let's step back from the peasant's cottage for a moment and drift up the hill to the stone walls of the local manor house or castle. You might think the wealthy slept in luxury, but winter is the great equalizer. In many ways, The lord and lady were colder than the peasants. Stone is unforgiving. A massive stone castle takes forever to heat and loses that heat instantly. While the peasant cottage is small, low-ceilinged, and packed with bodies, the lord's chamber is vast, with high ceilings where the heat vanishes into the rafters. The tapestries hanging on the walls aren't just for decoration, they are insulation, trying to keep the drafty stone from sucking the warmth out of the room. The wealthy had distinct advantages, of course. Their beds were surrounded by heavy velvet curtains, creating a room within a room. Before getting into bed, a servant would use a warming pan, a brass container on a long handle filled with hot coals, and slide it between the linen sheets to take off the chill. They wore nightcaps, heavy woolen hats to keep heat from escaping their heads, and they slept in fur-lined robes. But even with all this finery, ink would often freeze in the inkwells inside the castle bedrooms. The isolation of the elite meant they didn't have the benefit of the animal radiator or the pile of bodies. A lord might sleep in grand solitude, but he would shiver in his silk sheets while the peasant snored warmly in his straw. Let's return to the cottage. The night is deepening. The wind has picked up, and fine, powdery snow is being driven against the wattle walls. Inside, the sound is muffled, a distant roaring that makes the silence inside feel even safer. You are sitting on a three-legged stool near the dying fire. You can see the breath of the sleepers now, small white clouds puffing into the air with every exhale. It is a reminder of just how cold the room actually is. If you were to leave a cup of water on the table, it would have a thick lid of ice by morning. There is a psychological weight to this season. We call it seasonal affective disorder now, but they just called it the winter melancholy. The days are short, gray, and brutal. The nights are endless. To keep their spirits up, storytelling became a survival mechanism. You can imagine the grandfather, his voice raspy, telling tales of saints, dragons, or local legends before the family drifted off. These stories were more than entertainment. They were a way to knit the group together, to remind them that spring would eventually come, that the sun would return. As you watch the embers fade to a dull, ash-covered gray, you notice the absolute stillness. In our modern world, there is always a hum, a refrigerator, a distant siren, the blue light of a phone. Here, the darkness is complete. It is a velvet weight against your eyes. The silence is so profound, you can hear the settling of the house timbers, the scratch of a mouse in the thatch, the slow, deep breathing of the cow in the byre. This sensory deprivation is something we rarely experience. It forces the mind to turn inward. It is boring, yes, but it is also deeply restorative. It is a rest that goes down to the marrow of the bone. Survival here is a series of small, repetitive tasks: checking the latch, banking the fire, stuffing a rag into a drafty crack, turning the hourglass. It is a life of maintenance, of holding the line against the elements. There is no conquering winter, there is only enduring it. You might wonder about hygiene. In these temperatures, bathing was rare and dangerous. Getting wet meant getting cold, and getting cold could lead to a chest sickness that could kill you in days. So people would dry wash, using linen cloths to rub their skin, or wash only their hands and face. The smell of the room is strong, a mix of humanity, smoke, and animals. But to the people living here, it just smells like home. It smells like safety. As the night stretches on toward the early hours of the morning, the cold reaches its peak. This is the wolf hour, the time when the fire is dead and the sun is still far away. This is when the family huddles tightest. The frost begins to form on the inside of the door. The simple act of staying asleep becomes a challenge. You might find yourself waking up, shivering, pulling your knees to your chest, tucking your nose inside your collar to conserve every scrap of heat. Yet there is beauty here too. Imagine waking up during that quiet watch in the middle of the night. You step outside for a moment to relieve yourself. The snow has stopped, the clouds have cleared, The sky is a vast, glittering dome of stars, sharper and brighter than you have ever seen them. The moonlight turns the snow-covered fields into a sea of blue and silver. The air is so clean it tastes like iron. The silence of the winter landscape is massive, indifferent, and breathtaking. You hurry back inside, your teeth chattering, grateful for the smell of the straw and the warmth of the sleepers. This cycle repeats for months. The shrinking woodpile, the thinning sack of grain, the darkening days. But humans are adaptable. We are creatures of habit. The boring routine of winter, the sleeping, the waking, the huddling, is what kept our ancestors alive. They didn't fight the season. They slowed down to match it. They went into a kind of hibernation, conserving energy, sleeping longer, dreaming deeper. As we stand here in the corner of the room, watching the steady rise and fall of the blankets, we can appreciate the simple miracle of it. There is no technology here to save them, no thermostat to turn up, just wood, wool, mud, and each other. The first gray light of dawn begins to bleed through the cracks in the shutters. The rooster in the barn hasn't crowed yet, but the rhythm of the house is changing. The father stirs. He disentangles himself from the pile of blankets, his breath smoking in the air. He moves to the hearth, finding the faint red spark he saved the night before. With a handful of dry moss and a few dry twigs, he coaxes it back to life. A small yellow flame licks upward, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls. The day has begun. The children will wake soon, stiff and hungry. The mother will break the ice on the water bucket. The animals will be fed. The struggle continues, but they have made it through another night. As we prepare to leave this frozen moment in time, take a second to feel the weight of your own blanket, the warmth of your own room. We often complain about the boring of winter, the gray skies, the being stuck inside, but perhaps we should look at it differently. Perhaps we should see it as a time to slow down, to gather close, to appreciate the walls that shelter us and the warmth we often take for granted. The medieval winter was a monster that waited outside the door, but in here, in the quiet, dusty, animal-scented dark, humanity found a way to keep the light burning. So, as you lay your head down tonight, imagine that heavy wool cloak pulled up to your chin. Imagine the smell of wood smoke and dried lavender. Imagine the comforting sound of the wind outside, knowing it cannot reach you. Let the silence of the snow-covered world wrap around you. The fire is banked, the door is barred. You are safe. Sleep well in your second sleep. The long night is not something to fear, but a time to rest, to dream, and to endure. Good night,